Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us. Welcome to another Creator Space session. Really excited to continue, presenting some information and knowledge on 3D animation, 3D design using Blender. So it's really a great opportunity to get into this if you haven't started yet. So again, I want to thank everyone for joining us. My name is Tom Sternad. And in terms of how this project works, I just want to thank all our partners. We have the Canada Council for the Arts, and we have our library partners. We have the Blue Mountains Public Library, Collingwood Public Library, Wasaga Beach Public Library. And the software we're using is Blender. There is, I believe, 3.0 is now available. I just saw that, I think, yesterday. So I think I have on this graphic still 2.9 or something, but it's I think there's a 3.0 out. From what I heard, but Leon can confirm that. But yeah, so it's Mac OS, Windows, Linux, so any kind of operating system. It's free, and we have it loaded on our computers. So there's iMacs at the library partners that I just mentioned. So you can go and rewatch this when it's done. You can rewatch it, try it out there if you don't have your own desktop computer to use this software on. So that's the really great news. You can go to the libraries, otherwise download it, and you can rewatch it if you don't already have it downloaded. So just sit back, grab some popcorn, and let's get into 3D animation and design on Blender with Leon. So here we go. Here's Leon.
Hey, thank you, Tom, for the introduction. Welcome back, everybody, to Blender Introductions. The second part, first part. It's gonna be a two-part sections, and hopefully, it's by the end of the second part, you'll be able to start your own project with Blender. Like Tom mentioned, Blender is a free program that you can download at blender.org, and apparently there's a version 3, which I'm not I didn't know yet, because I'm still using the 2.93, which is you don't need to have the latest I guess the latest version of Blender all the time, because the biggest changes is from 2.7 and 2.8. That's when Blender actually overhauled the whole user interface and how it looks and everything. That's the main thing that you need to the two different versions that you need to be aware of. But as far as I'm concerned, there is no big changes like that in the foreseeable future. So even if you use 2.95, 2.85 instead of the latest one, you can still follow me, because the latest version is basically they just adding certain things into Blender system, and they also fix a few bugs here and there to make it run better. And again, some of the latest updates might not pertain to what you like to do. Sometimes they're just adding stuff into, let's say, their visual effects category, which is not something that I normally use. I use Blender for modeling and animating. So that's, but sometimes they do have a little bit adding new versions into Blender for modeling and animations, which sometimes I don't even use yet. So again, the main thing is to know you don't need to keep up to date with the latest versions all the time. But since it's free, if you want to keep updating it, it's fine. You can always do that. But for me, I tend to change a few of the shortcut keys. So every time I'm updating it, sometimes it doesn't transfer. So it's kind of like a hassle for me. So unless it's something that I really need or I can use to make my work faster, I generally don't upgrade it all the time. Anyway, so that's a bit of version of Blender. And as far as Blender program is on its own, I'm not sure how many of you have look into it or have been using it before, or is totally new. But a quick introductions to it is it's a free program, and is a very, very powerful program, and it can pretty much do a lot of things. You can make a production from the beginning until the end, until your final products with this one program. You don't really need to use any other program outside Blender. That's how powerful this program is. And I watch the interview with the Blender creator. He said that it's up to the point that this Blender has so many things in this one software that he's in the future he's going to break it into like several different part of Blenders. So people that use Blender specifically for modeling, they just need to just download that specific Blender for modeling. So you don't need all this extra buttons that you don't need or you don't even need to use, right? Because Blender is a powerful program, but it's also very complicated because there's a lot of things in here that you probably not going to, you will never going to touch it, right? Or because unless you want to become the generalist, which I, some of you can do that. Some of you are not very interested in that. You don't really need to know ins and outs of Blender, right? So you just need to use it for the purpose of what you want to use, what you want to create for your own project. So like an example is like Adobe. Like Adobe has multiple software like Photoshop, Illustrators, Adobe Animate, Adobe like audio and stuff like that, right? So essentially, Blender is one software like Adobe that can just use, you can do everything in there. So you could imagine like Adobe software into just one single software, right? So Photoshop, Illustrators, and everything into one single software, and that's Blender. And you can get everything there for free, which is the great thing about Blender. Why I really like about Blender. Unfortunately, Blender is not industry standard. Like, if you work in, if you're learning 3D in order for you to take it to the next level, you want to become a professional, you want to work in the industry. Unfortunately, Blender is not the program they use. They use a program like Maya, 3D Max, and other programs like that. But doesn't mean that what you learn here is not going to be able to transfer it, right? It's a program. It's like if you understand how to use Blender, your skill will be able to you'll be able to transfer your skill to whatever other 3D programs that that the industry is using. And the great thing about Blender too, like the team that make Blender, they're always trying to make it as friendly as possible and as close as possible to the industry standards. So a lot of the shortcut keys and how to move things and how the principle of this 3D program is similar to what the industry is using. So yeah, that's the short summary of Blender, and it's a great program, and it's great for people that the first time people that just starting to learn 3D, and you don't need to pay anything and everything is free. All you need to do is just to have a computer strong enough for you to do what you need to do in Blender. Okay, so without further ado, well, I'll start explaining how the software work, and this is just the most basic what I normally use. And on the second next week, we are going to, as you can probably see my shirt there, I'm ready. We are going to try to model the, well, the X-wing. Not sure why it's not opening. Let me close. Oh, I think I saved it by mistake. Okay, well, that's, well, I have to build it again. for next, we'll build it together next year. Basically, if you're familiar with Star Wars, the X-wing starships, I built something. We can build something with our knowledge from today, and my thought is the sooner you can model, the sooner you can use and creating something that's interesting, the sooner you'll be able to learn the program. So on the previous introductions, we were doing the crates and how to build it and how to model it and how to texture it. And for this introductions, we are going to model an X-wing, which is a lot more interesting than a crate. But don't get too intimidated with it. Like, it's actually pretty simple to make, and it's using just a basic. I can tell you like how to create it using a basic shapes that you already have with Blender, and then we can try to texture it and so on and so on. Okay, that's unfortunate. I thought, like, I'm pretty sure I opened it. Yeah. All right. Anyway, okay. So as you can see in your screen right now, when you open Blender, you will have this view here, and you'll get what they call it, your Blender 3D viewport. Okay, so they will give you a default camera, a default cube, and a default light. Okay, so this is your work area in how you're going to create your art in here. Okay, so, and then this is all your prop and your tools here to select anchor and move and rotate and scale, right? Like if you move, so if you click on the object, if you click on the tool move, you can move it, right? You can move it on the Z-axis or in the X-axis. In 3D program, if you're not familiar with it, you have what they call it like X, Y, and Z axis, right? So anything in 3D, you get like have that 3 axis that. So, and then if you click on the rotate, you can rotate your cube or your object, or you can scale it, right? You can scale it uniformly, or you can scale it in, like, click on, let's say, in the Y-axis, right? You can scale it in X-axis. So that's the options that you can do. And then you can select box, basically just selecting, you can select one object or you can select multiple objects by right-clicking on it. And at the bottom here, let's see, we got, maybe I should open this. I'll put it on the left side. As you, this is like what, this is my right, middle, and left. Sorry, left, middle and right mouse. So what I click here, you'll see it on the left side there. But also at the bottom here, you can see the what Blender call your what is going on and what you can see. So if you left click, select, and then if you select, and then if you left click and drag, you can get like the box select. That's for select all, right? And if you right click, you can open the object context menu, right? And you can, again, like this will make more sense once we start using it. But this is the things that I normally use. Okay, so let's close that. And if you can look on the top right here, that's basically your 3D viewport rotation there, right? You can like rotate it. And if you want to zoom in, if you have a mouse scroll, you can scroll in, right? And this is the orthographic view. We'll get there. If you don't have a scroll mouse, I think these control plus and minus, yeah, right? Control plus and minus is your shortcut keys to zoom in and out. And if you want to rotate shortcut keys, I normally use the Alt and then left mouse button. I'm not sure why they put the middle button there, but rotates. If you want to drag it, you can have the shift. For me, shift and middle mouse, as you can drag your in 3D viewport. All right, so this is the next thing is that's the basic navigations for it. Like you can rotate middle mouse and scroll. The next thing that you need to know is between what they call it the perspective view and the orthographic view. Now this is what they call it the perspective view. Okay, so and if your keyboard has a numpad, which I highly recommend it if you're working with Blender, the shortcut key will be, if you want to switch between perspective and orthographic, is to have number 5 on your numpad. Okay. Now, as you can see, it's changing a little slightly. So this is an orthographic or not an orthographic, but like is number 5 will remove your perspective on your object. As you can see, in perspective view, you can see like the vanishing points for your cube, right? You can that's as objects get further away from your eyes, it get kind of narrower. So that's just like if you're learning your perspective in art course, they have that 1 vanishing point, 2 vanishing points, and so on and so on. So that's the perspective view. And if you go to numpad number 5, that's removing your perspective view. So no matter where you look at it, the scale, the shape of the cube is consistent. There's no narrowing at all, and like there's no perspective. As you can see, like the top, bottom, it looks pretty straight on cube, right? This is very handy later on when you're modeling with when you're sculpting and when you're doing sculpting any objects or characters, and this is really good to have in order for you to see whether your sculpt is actually looks good or not, right? So, and the orthographic view is if you go to numpad number 1, and if you press 5, and this is your orthographic front view. Basically, orthographic is looking your object in a 2-dimensional view. So like how you see your drawing on the paper, right? So it's just like how you look at it from front view, and then if numpad number 3, you see it on the right. Numpad number 7, you'll see it on a top view. So this is the main, I think it's very important for you to remember when you're modeling or doing anything in Blender, especially modeling, because you will switch back and forth between the perspective and the orthographic, especially if you're modeling using a reference, right? Because let's say you draw your character first, or you draw something on the paper first, or on a Photoshop, and then you bring that to Blender, right? And that drawing will be in orthographic view, which is like in 2D. So sometimes you want to have the shape properly sized first, and how to and make sure your object looks okay in orthographic view, because that's how your reference is in 2D view. And then after you're done, you can start tweaking it in the perspective view, right? So again, this is all will make more sense once we start modeling next week. So next is so yeah, like as I mentioned at the bottom here, the UI is here. Is just that is basically just to tell you what your current action is, right? So, and what could you do with your actions with your mouse at the moment. If you press Shift, you can see how that changed. If you press Control, like that's actions will be changing, like what you can do with your mouse, right? Okay, so next is this here. You can separate it. Okay, the top view is your 3D viewport, and this, the bottom here, is your timeline. You will use this more like when you're animating in the future, but like if you're modeling, you don't really need this at the moment. Okay. So I'll introduce you more about this when we get to the animation stage. But right now, the introduction is how to start modeling your project. So we don't need this. You can, if you go between here, as you can see, the cursor change. That's, you can bring it up and down. Okay. The next thing is up here. You can see there's a different options here: layout, modeling, sculpting, UV editing. So this is basically all the stuff that Blender can. Blender gives you a template of what you're trying to do, right? This is the layout of a general layout for the 3D viewport. If you go to, let's say if you want to do a modeling, you can just go to the modeling. Then it will take you directly and how to the viewport will be optimized for you to model your object. And if you want to do sculpting, as you can see on the left here, this is all sculpting tool that you needed. And if you want to do UV editing, after you're done modeling, you can do this, and texture paint, so on, shading, and animations. As you can see, animations, you got your camera, your 3D viewport, and then your timeline here. So this is template that you can use right away to optimize your work area. So in our case here, we're just going to go to the modeling. Well, we just go to layout for now. So yeah, that's another way of doing it. And then if you go to File, and if you want to if you want to create a new, you can get a general. So a general is basically like, this is the default workspace when you open Blender, right? But let's say if you want to do 2D animations, right? That will change. And so you get like, you can start drawing like it's a canvas, like when you're drawing in 2D program, right? And this is all the tools here that you needed. And then if you want to go to sculpting, you got this ball that you can start. This is optimized for your sculpting. Later on in the future, we can touch on that. VFX, video editing, and so on and so on. So that's part of the stuff that you can do and to optimize your work areas so you can work right away on what you want to do. All right. I have a little bit of a sniffles. Okay, so next one is you can split the view. If you go to the top here, you can split it. And then click and drag, you can split it. And then if you want to close it, go to the top again, and then click, and then you can have that. As you can see, the arrow there, like that means the if I'm going this way, the middle work area will be covering the work area on the right side, right? So the same thing if you want to go to the top bottom, at the bottom here. As soon as your cursor changing to a plus here, if you can, I'm not sure if you can see. Hopefully you can see it. That means you can click and drag. You can open it, so you get 3 different viewports, right? And then the good thing about this is you can change it. Let's say you want to keep this one as edit mode. You can you want to change this into a UV editor, right? And then you want to change this into like a shader editor. So this is very important for you. And then this is where you can see how you can unwrap your objects. It will show up here. And then this will be good for your materials. So this is very good to know, right? To open separate windows like this. But again, like if you go to like a different templates here, that templates will automatically give you the best optimized for whatever that you needed to do. So, but if you want to have your own customized, then you can do that here, right? You can open it and you can create it yourself. Now, if you want to close this, you cannot just close from here, let's say from the bigger screen here. to the right, you can't do that. You have to go close the top and bottom, left and right first. So the you have to close this one first. The top, you gotta close it, the top and bottom divider, and then you can close the left and right. Again, like if you're confused, there's you can either send me an email and I can try to explain it a bit more. But if you do have any questions later on, you can ask me then. Or maybe after you're playing around yourself and then you find a difficulty and you're not sure what to do, and if you want to send me an email, you're welcome to do that too. Tom will give you my email address, and I'll try my best to reply as soon as possible. Okay, so let's go back. All right, so the next things you need to know is on the right side here. This is what you call it, the library or the scene collections in Blender. So anything that is in the 3 viewports will show up here. So this is the list that you can have to organize it, and you can make a group or collection, and then you can put all your objects into different collection. And at the bottom here is your property windows. So this is like, it's a lot more going on here. There's a lot more that we can, maybe there's a different, as you can see in the left here, there's a different options. I will explain this in more details as we start learning how to model. Again, remember, in Blender, there's a lot of things that you're probably not going to use. So don't be intimidated with it. Don't get too confused. Don't worry about it. I'll try my best to streamline it and to make sure that you can go and do the projects that you want to do without getting too overwhelmed with the software. So this is your property windows here, and I will tell you more about what each, not even all of it, but like, I mean, some of it that you needed to know when you're creating your project. So I guess an example of this property window, if you click on that, if you click on the lights here, it will show up kind of like a light bulb here, right? If you click on the cube, the light bulb will be gone because that's will be the property for this object. And the camera, you got a different property for the camera as well. So if you click the light, if you select the light, you got you can control the what kind of lights do you want and what the colors of the light, the power of the light, and blah blah blah. Sorry, and like all these different options that you can customize it. Again, that seems to be a lot, but as you go along, it gets easier, and you get you'll understand more as we get a way ahead in the future. All right, so now the next thing that you need to know is object mode and edit mode. Okay, so object mode is basically you're moving the whole object. So if you move a cube, it will move the whole thing, right? And if you want to scale it, you scale the whole object. So basically, that's what the object mode is. Edit mode, if you want to change a specific things in the object, right? If you want to change the shape of the object. Right now, we are in what you call it, the dot. I forgot what. I'm not sure why I forgot the name of it. Basically, like you can the vertex mode. So as you can see, like each dot here is a vertex, and you can manipulate that vertex individually, right? So you can change the shape of the objects by vertex. And then in edit mode, you also have what they call it, the line mode. The line, so you're selecting line instead of the dots or the vertex, right? So if you're changing it, if you're moving it, you're moving the whole line. Rotating it, you're rotating the whole line instead of one vertex. And the next one, the last one, is what you call it, the face mode. So it's selecting the whole face, right? And if you want to move it, you're moving the whole face. Rotate it, you're rotating the whole face. That's what you can do in edit mode. So as you're modeling your object, you will switch between vertex, line, and face, depending on what you needed. And depending on what you want to do, I'm sorry if you hear that. That's my son. So yeah, that's how you can change edit your object, individual vertex or line or face. Okay, so the next thing you need to know about starting Blender is different objects that you can have. Okay, so if you press Shift A, you can have that will give you options here, right? What you can have. The mesh, as you can see, if a plane, it will show up as a plane, right? And if you want to have a cube, look, you got a cube here. Is a basic things that you can have: UV sphere. You can have like a cone, cylinder, anything. That's basic shapes that are available from Blender to start with. So this is really good to when you're modeling, you want to break down your objects or your model into the most basic shapes you can have. So if you have a training in drawing or fundamental arts, they'll always to tell you like to draw the basic shape first before you adding details. So this is the same concept in Blender. Is you want to look at your drawing in the most basic shape before you start adding details into it. So the mesh here give you all the necessary basic shape that you can start before you can edit it into something that more complicated in the future. The curve is essentially like the same thing. You can just move the curve like how that's normally curve is very useful if you're doing something like a rope or like a hair, anything that can flow, right? So that's the Bezier curve is, you can use that. Now the Nurbs curve, circle surface here. This, people don't really use this as much when they're modeling. They, at the very beginning of the 3D program, like very early when the 98, when like Pixar came out with the first Toy Story, like at the very early stage of 3D program, people model with surface curves instead of mesh, right? But now mesh is a more sophisticated way of modeling it, and there's a lot more you can do with it than a surface. But it's not necessarily that this is not usable, but you can still use it for something that, let's say, creating clothes or anything like that. It's just, but again, you don't really, I don't really use this as much, so I don't think you need to worry about it too much. The Metaball, that's another way of modeling it. A model doing like the basics, so it's a whole different way of doing modeling. So essentially, like the most common method people use to model is using the mesh, and sometimes a curve. But the mesh is the most basic thing that you will use as an object to start modeling something. So what else that I need to know about this? So another basic tool that you need to know when modeling is Subdivide. So let's say with the cube here, you want to add more loop cuts in order to be able to create more details in this cube, right? You can go to Edit Mode, and then you can right-click and Subdivide. And on the bottom left here, you'll see a Subdivide option. And you can see the number cut, the smoothness, and stuff like that. Let's say number cut is, I want to say 4, 7. So if you select, you gotta select everything first, and then Subdivide. As you can see, it's Subdivide and giving you more loop cuts inside of the cube in order to make it so you can have more details when you edit your object. Now, this is good and bad, right? So depending on what you need to do, you generally don't want to have too much polygon, or what they call it, a triangle in your object. Especially if you're working in the game industry, the more triangle you have, the more the system need to use to process it. That means for people with that doesn't have like a very powerful computer, or like not a processor, they cannot process all these informations, triangles. So your computer, your game will not play really well. It's not playing in a very good speed, right? Because the more triangle, the heavier it is to process. And for movies, you generally don't need to worry about the number of triangle. But if you're creating your own movies, you need to be aware of it, because the more triangle you have, the longer it will be to render your object. So Now, so like adding all this loop cut help you to get more detail, to manipulate your objects in a more detailed way. But at the end, you're gonna take a long time for you to render anything from it. Now, the great thing about it, like we don't really need that. Now we have a new system, what they call we can use the modifier to create something more smooth by what you call it a subdivision service modifier. Now in here, you can make it smooth with just, you can see like how smooth that is, like a ball. But if you edit it, this is basically a cube, right? So this is very like, the subdivision modifier is a great tool for you to get a very smooth looking, nice looking model without having the need to have more polygon, more triangle in your model, right? So this is, you will use this modifier a lot when you're starting modeling. But it's good to know, like, I mean, sometimes you do need to subdivide it in order to get something that you needed. And the next thing you want to know is if you click in any of the edges or the two vertex or the face, if you click Control R, as you can see, you can look at it and put it manually where you wanted to have it, right? So when you subdivide it, it will give you an automatic distance of the loop cut. But sometimes you don't want to subdivide this a certain side of your object, right? You just want to subdivide this side of the object. So you don't need, if you're using the subdivide method, right? It will give you the equal subdivision, equal loop cuts for your object, right? While the just a normal loop cut will give you just one single loop cut that you needed. So sometimes you just need one loop cut. You don't, instead of like the whole subdivide loop cuts. Anyway, like we'll continue this next week and to go more in depth into like how to use this subdivide and loop cuts and the subdivision service and modifiers. We're gonna start using that next week when we are creating our modeling our X-Wing. So you can follow along next week, and if you're interested in that, and we'll continue on with, hopefully we have time to do a quick texturing and unwrapping and stuff like that. And then we can continue on later on with, in the future, with a different way of modeling, which is by sculpting instead of like basic moving vertex. You're doing the sculpting, and basically sculpting is basically sculpting is just like if you're playing with a clay, and that's you're sculpting a clay in the Blender 3D program. So yeah, thank you very much for coming and attending this workshop today with me. I hope you learned something to start with for you to play around with. there's a lot more in this program that you can learn. But right now, I think this is the most basic thing that you need to know in order for you to start modeling. We'll use this knowledge next week once we start modeling the X-Wing. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I'll try to answer your questions today, or maybe in, if you have questions sometimes during the week, you can wait until next week, or you can send me an email. All right. Well, thank you again for coming, and I'll see you next week.
Perfect. Thanks, Leon. That was fantastic. So let me, we'll just basically have, you can, I put my email up and Leon's email, so you can send us questions like Leon suggested there, and then we can get to them next week as we continue this, and that would be great. So feel free to contact us, and in the chat you can also ask questions, or especially it'll be more important, I think, next week at the top of the session we can look at the chat, and I can let Leon know too and forward stuff. So if you send me stuff, I can forward it to Leon. So either way, we'll get into some of these questions and concepts. And you might, again, like Leon said, think about some stuff, and you'll figure out some more questions as you review this as well. So again, just want to thank all our partners in this project. So we have the Canada Council for the Arts, we have the Blue Mountains Public Library, we have the Collingwood Public Library, Wasaga Beach Public Library, and thank you so much to Leon for doing this session. And I know he's really busy, so I really appreciate everyone, all our artists who can take some time and share their knowledge with everyone out there as well. So really, really want to thank everyone, all our instructors, and for Leon for doing this. And again, next week, part 2, we'll continue this. If you haven't signed up for that, please go to our tbmcs.ca. You can sign up for there, and you'll be able to join us again next week. So that's it for now. Have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you next week. Take care.